guys, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about FinTech, and we have a great panel. As I think you just learned, FinTech is kind of at its peak as far as it's ever been. If you just go back 5 years and do a Google Trends search on FinTech, 5 years ago, if today we were at 100, 5 years ago we were at 4. So it's 25 times more popular in terms of discussion than it was just 5 years ago. And we have a great panel spanning a few different stages of investment in FinTech. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Tomasz Rubens from DN Capital. It's a 200 million euro fund, and Tomasz is a partner there. They've out of the UK. And then we have Tomasz Czechowicz. I probably pronounced that name completely wrong. Tomasz is a very accomplished entrepreneur from Poland and founder of MCI Capital. And then we have Izabela Olszewska from the Warsaw Stock Exchange. So we have a early stage investor, a growth stage investor, and then finally a public markets exchange. So we talked a little bit about how hot FinTech is nowadays. I'd like to ask each of you whether you think this is warranted, and are you making more investments in FinTech in 2018, 2019 than you were in 2016, 2017, or fewer, do you think?
I think we've been, so just to give a quick introduction on us, we tend to typically come in very early stage, so we're talking $500,000 to $5 million initial investments and then deploy up to $20 million to companies. I think our first FinTech investments were back in 2000, so it's a space we've been looking at for quite a while. I think we're keeping at the same pace in terms of deals. I think one of the reasons why it's making more noise to the general public, a lot of those companies have now matured to become huge businesses. I think at the early stage, in fact, there has been potentially even a decrease in investments in FinTech over the last couple of years. But in terms of mega deals, in terms of large deals, there's been an acceleration because those companies have been maturing over the past 5 to 10 years. And one of our prime examples is Remitly in the US, which recently raised a $100 million round from Naspers. It's been around for now since 2011. Tomasz is invested in Dietl, which they recently IPO'd, but this is also a company now going a few years back. So that's, it's still a space with excitement going forward, but it's been going on for a while.
Tomasz, tell us a little bit about MCI and how you feel about FinTech.
Yeah, we are a $700 million evergreen fund, managing mostly growth capital, late venture, growth capital, and buyout, digital buyout. Yes, we are definitely the digital private equity leader in Central Eastern Europe, one of the larger players in Europe in that space. FinTech represents about close to 1/3 of our portfolio at the moment, and there was 0 5 years ago. That shows something. I'm afraid I will be not able to put more money to FinTech than exit this year. But probably we'll continue to do investments. Our latest investment was a FinTech investment. We did a leverage buyout of NetRisk, which is a CE copycat of Money Supermarket in UK. Yeah,
yep.
That you are aware of Money Supermarket. That's a like €2 billion marketplace for financial products based in UK. That we did similar investments here in Central Eastern Europe recently in December. That was €70 million deal. Yeah, I think there are probably payments and loans are already kind of maturing. I think Adyen was amazing.
Yep.
What we saw yesterday, 100%
yep.
upfit first day of trading. It's not even happened during the internet bubble. Yeah, there wasn't probably something like that during the internet bubble. I don't remember. 100% one day up. Yeah, that shows that the next 6 months will be still okay for FinTech.
Perhaps, or it was just mispriced. So Izabela, speaking of IPOs, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Warsaw Stock Exchange and then how you look at FinTech?
So hello, I'm the only person in this panel that does not represent the investor, but I think that I can add some other perspective to this panel. I represent the Warsaw Stock Exchange, which is a middle-sized exchange in Europe, but we are the biggest market in the central and eastern region, with the capitalization of domestic companies on the level of 160 billion euro. Of course, we are one of the exchange which is not the isolated market, but we operate internationally, and we are also we all fintechs and their impact on the markets, on the exchanges. That also that this is the impact also on the Warsaw Stock Exchange. And I would like to say that, in my view, the two main trends that have been shaping the capital markets landscape, and the exequo regulations and the technology. And the two trends, they are very important, and they impact each other. And related to the fintech, I would like to say that it has an impact on each part of the value chain of the capital market. So I would start from raising the capital, and then trade execution, and then clearing and settlement. So I mean the post-trade environment, and also market data. So just to give you the example, so every investor on the capital market make this investment on the basis of the information and data, and we live in a very complex world, so we have the information, the data from different sources. It's very difficult just to combine all this data and process, and then create the conclusion. I think that in this area, the artificial intelligence and all fintech solution this type, they are very helpful. Also, on the capital market, the technology, DLT technology, like blockchain, is widely used. Currently, mainly in the post-trade area, but also in this first part of the value chain, so capital raising. And also there are other fintech solutions which are very useful and are very disruptive in this landscape. I would say that generally the exchanges, they treat fintechs as partners. But in one point, I think that they could be treated as a competitor. So I think in the part of capital raising, because they create a solution which are type B2C solution. So in this sense, I think that the new companies that they try to offer the solution for investors to raise the capital directly, that can be treated as a competitor for the exchanges.
Great. So over the past decade or so, we've seen an evolution in different types of fintech startups. I'd say 10 years ago, you had companies like Stripe and Square and Izabela, maybe not quite 10 years ago, but almost 10 years ago getting started. Then we had a lot of excitement in peer-to-peer lending, first on the consumer side, then the small business side. Then I think for a little while there was a phase in Bitcoin was a fad, and then insurance, and then now blockchain again. What areas are you excited about investing in? Like, where do you think is the future? What is some undiscovered area that I should start looking at now?
Well, I think in Europe there's an exciting moment in time right now where PSD2 is being activated across Europe, which gives startups, obviously, depending on the consent of the customers, to actually manage their bank accounts and provide products around this. And I think this is an extremely exciting space. A lot of things can be applied to this. So this is a space we're actively looking into. And then,
what kind of startups do you think are best suited to take advantage of PSD2?
Well, I think if you think, one big cost especially to either small businesses or to millennials is overdraft fees. Yep. And so then you can use predictive analytics to better assess when someone is going to be in overdraft and provide them potentially with a loan, for a short-term loan, so they don't have to pay this excessive fee. So those would be just a very specific example. Yeah.
Makes sense. It's interesting because that is a space that in the US there are probably 20 different companies tackling it. And actually more recently, I've seen in the neobank world that the innovation has come from Europe and came to the US. But in every other space, I think the innovation started in the US. So it's interesting here that, and the neobank is partially for regulatory reasons. There's been no new banks in America. Yeah. But anyway, interesting that that overdraft space has not yet been tackled. Tomasz, any thoughts?
now what we understand by observing the market, fintech is like this is like US to Western Europe to Central Europe to Eastern Europe. Yes, I mean we have kind of Cabbage in UK, investment market invoice, and I think Cabbage I met first time probably like 7-8 years ago. It was already $100 million business, and it's simply these innovations are basically copycatting. They are copycatted in Europe. US is basically the kind of original market. And the last 5 years was about European champions, and most of them are already established. That I think somehow this fintech is maturing for me. And similar to digital media, social media, retail marketplaces, I think PS2 will make a lot of opportunities for the marketplace model in the fintech industry. Right now we've been more like a kind of e-commerce for me, which you take a risk of providing loans, etc. I think this will be the PS2 will open kind of probably make a second wave of the lead generation businesses for the financial institutions, plus increase the level of digitalization of the financial channels. Insurance space is far less advanced than fintech, and I think probably we'll put a little bit more focus on insurance part, because insurance is a huge market and it's much less digitalized than financial services. That basically telematics, digital channels, that's kind of interesting areas. And I think probably at the moment we will be facing much more value creation in Central Eastern Europe, hopefully, than in Western Europe, because there is a gap. I mean, there is almost, we've been expecting much stronger fintech projects in Central Eastern Europe. Not yet, but again, I think it usually goes this way, that you have a European champions and they are not very good in taking over the Central Eastern Europe because of different economics here. That there is always like a very nice space of regional champions for Central Eastern Europe. That Dietl of Central Eastern Europe, Market Invoice of Central Eastern Europe, iVoc of Central Eastern Europe, this sort of things, which will be built and scaled for the Central Europe economics. Yeah.
And do you think these companies will scale beyond Central and Eastern Europe, or is there an opportunity? Like, you're a growth stage investor, you have to see a certain return multiple.
We thought with fintech will be different, because there is much stronger, let's say, fintech skill set in if you compare media and retail and financial services. Financial services were very strong in Poland because there was a kind of new banks being established the last 20 years.
Yep.
One of the very first digital banks were built in Poland, like mBank or Alior. But I have to say, unfortunately, it's not the case, yeah? Because, I mean, generally, the CE is lacking the European or global rollout skills, yeah? Like great products, amazing engineers, but basically not so easy to see the companies which are able to scale up to become European or global champions, because it's a lot about the market acquisition, building alliances. I mean, very few examples of successful rollout up to now. Maybe that will change in the future, but probably we are lowering our expectations of seeing. Okay, TransferWise is coming from Central Eastern Europe. But basically completely removed almost to UK. You can say Azimo is from Krakow, but basically the leadership is in London. That I think that's maybe this sort of examples, but it's more about the regional champions, and I think that should be a kind of next couple of years of value creation in the regional champion space here.
Yeah, makes sense. Izabela, you mentioned the blockchain, and I think like, of the businesses to be disrupted first, many people say that exchanges are one, and you have a bunch of different types of exchanges. Obviously, in the last several years, we've seen this concept of ICO, where people are selling coins. How do you guys think about the blockchain, and how do you stay ahead of the disruption?
So I think that first of all, we would like to also organize the market based on the blockchain. I think that this is something that is in the pipeline. But just looking at the whole Warsaw Stock Exchange offer, this market will be for smaller and the companies with the shorter history, so also for startups. So currently we start our offer from New Connect market, which is the public market. We would like to build a private market and base it on the blockchain. So this is our plan for the nearest future. However, you should realize that the blockchain is good for this type of market. When we expect just some raising capital and maybe perhaps we discuss it with our FSA, whether it would be possible also to implement some limited trading in this market. However, for the main market, even for New Connect, the blockchain, I would say it's too slow. So we have currently some algo trading activities on the main market. So this type of technology, it's not very useful in this part of our offer. And also there are some also plans on the post-trade side of our Polish capital market value chain. So our CSD is just working on the e-voting system based on blockchain. So I think that in our capital group and also in our associated companies, we'll use this technology very soon.
Yeah, great. So we talked a little bit about international stuff from moving from the US to the UK to Central Europe to Eastern Europe. One thing that impacts some of this is Brexit. So Tomasz, you're based in the UK. How have you seen Brexit play out? How has it impacted your fund and your investments so far, and what do you see in the future?
Well, I think, to begin with, no one really knows how Brexit is playing out.
Yeah, of course.
So there's no fixed rule. In terms of funds, one of our biggest investors is EIF.
Yeah.
So obviously they need to think, their position of how to address funds that are located in London. For now, everything is fine, but we'll see what happens when the deadline hits next year. I think the most difficult thing that we're seeing for UK startups is just that potentially London is not seen anymore as the place to be.
Yeah.
And so you're just losing potentially talent to other geographies. I would say Berlin has become one very big international hub. You go to Berlin now, you can speak English to anyone. I mean, the Germans already speak good English themselves, but it's very international in its makeup. Paris is making a big push also to attract talent. So I think the biggest difficulty right now is, London still remains the hub, but how do you retain that talent, and how do you still, welcome this talent to come to your city? Yeah,
makes sense. Tomasz, you actually are the one that mentioned this progression. Speaking from the States, actually from based in San Francisco, I actually see one level deeper, which is actually like we're looking to China now for a lot of our innovations. Not necessarily that they're replicable here, but is that something that you guys are looking at all? Like as maybe the far future is China, or maybe there's something more applicable for you guys from there?
We try to develop relationship with China VCs and China large platforms like Alibaba and Tencent. I think there's a kind of alternative. If you want to build a global champion, right now you don't necessarily need to go to US. You can also go to Asia, and I think that's a pretty good alternative. There is a very good cultural fit between Central Europe and China, because it's a communist bloc. Yes, I mean, if as a Polish you go to China, you feel much more similarities than to US.
Yeah.
You see the same type of traffic on the airports, etc. I think that's a kind of big opportunity. They recognize Central Eastern Europe. There is one of the largest consumer finance companies in China is coming from Czech Republic. Yes, credit reform. I think that they have a lot of respect to the let's say entrepreneurship and technology talents. There is this Jedwabny Szlak Silk Road, which you know the story that.
Yep.
As long as China was connected with Europe, they've been doing great, yes?
Yeah.
When the connection was broken, that was a big problem, that they really want to have a strong links with Central Eastern Europe. That I think that's a big opportunity, and if you are large in China, you are large in Asia, yeah? Because that's kind of a major market that I think it's a very strong alternative to US expansion, and we'll be trying At the moment, it's only gaming, what I'm seeing here in the region, going there, and some product companies with in the financial space, yeah. But in the future, let's see.
Where do you think there are opportunities for Poland specifically? Now, not related to
No,
Asia.
for sure, gaming. I mean, gaming is like I mean, Poland is strong in gaming generally. I mean, if you look at the region, I mean, if you bet something in Poland, you should basically bet gaming. That's the space which created the first and the only one unicorn in Poland. And I think there's another gaming coming, that this could be kind of Silicon Valley of gaming. And I think the biggest gaming market and the biggest gaming company in the world is Tencent, yes?
Yep.
And China. That's a very logical channel to basically develop gaming companies, not direction US, but direction China, yeah? That's, then I think but the logistic I don't see Central Eastern Europe being, okay, there's a Taxify example from Estonia, but in general logistics space, transportation space is not yet becoming a kind of strong play here in the region.
Great. Okay. So next, we've just a few minutes left, and I'll play a little game, which is just basically overvalued or undervalued. So I'll throw out a topic and then ask you for your thoughts. So let's start with AI. Overvalued or undervalued?
I think it's valued correctly at the moment.
Oh, that's not the question.
No, but in terms, there are some segments where AI makes complete sense and where I think it's being undervalued, and there are other areas where I think it's being completely
What are
overvalued.
some of them?
So, I think we are seeing a lot of companies where they claim to be using AI where they're just being rule-based.
Yeah.
And I think this has no value whatsoever. I think when you're managing a lot of different data streams and you need to process them faster, then AI makes complete sense. And I think anything to do with autonomous cars, for instance,
Sure.
that's vital.
Absolutely. Tomasz?
I mean, we are across various private equity strategies, not only venture. I think venture was definitely undervalued in 2002. Yes, that 2002, 2003 up to 2005 there was undervalued assets in the venture space. Right now, I think there is a lot of money available, more money coming. A lot of strategic players are providing money to the venture space. That I will say, definitely I see more value in a leverage buyout space, yeah, late stage investing, venture growth.
And the question was AI.
Yeah, I know. No, and that's. I see generally venture being quite high. Yes.
Okay. So in general,
yeah,
everything I say is probably going to be overvalued in that case.
High.
Yeah. Isabella, what do you think?
I think that is, I would support the statement of my colleague.
Yeah.
So it's just equally valued, I would say.
Okay, fair enough. Cryptocurrencies.
Overvalued.
No view.
No view.
I think it is not properly understood, and I think that in this sense is overvalued.
Great. Okay. And so a tangent to that would be just blockchain.
Undervalued.
Probably it's a technology like mobile internet which will create a new business models, and we need to follow, observe, and make the proper bets.
I think undervalued.
Great. Now, sort of more traditional sectors, lending.
Undervalued.
Depends on the regions. I mean, that's...
Where is there opportunity?
No, I think that's still very underdeveloped in Central Eastern Europe, yes. And basically, I mean, the wave in UK is done, the wave in Western Europe, in the large countries in Western Europe is already done, yes. And then there is still a lot to be done in Central Eastern Europe in that space.
Undervalued.
Undervalued. Insurance.
Probably overvalued. I mean, it's just, right now it's a space for us where, we're early stage, and even the early rounds kind of skip us.
Yeah.
In terms of you need to raise 30, 50 million and then 200, 300 million for business that are still relatively small. So, we're still having a difficult time gauging risk versus reward. But we appreciate that it is a big space and there are big opportunities to be built.
Tomasz?
We understand that this is like versus FinTech is like 3-5 years difference in terms of development. Still lot of business models unproved that it's difficult to discuss. It's Revolut. It was overvalued or undervalued round before. Looking at the current round, yes, it was. That's still difficult to judge.
Yeah, the same, difficult to judge. I don't know this.
All right, great. Thank you, guys. We are out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts.